Hello and welcome to this community outreach meeting, and thank you for your patience as we got the meeting set up. This is December 12th, and this is a community outreach meeting for Stone's Throw Cannabis, which is proposing an adult use marijuana retail and courier establishment in Boston. This is a follow-up meeting to gather additional information about a proposal that has been presented about once previously. So thank you for your patience in holding your questions until the end, as there are several subjects we're legally required to cover in our presentation. This license is proposed to be located at 727 Atlantic Avenue in Boston, Massachusetts, zip code 02111. We have with us several representatives of Stone's Throw. We have Leslie Hawkins, attorney from Prince Lobel. We have Eric Lawrence and Desiree Frangel, who are both principals of Stone's Throw. So this meeting is going to open with a presentation about the proposed establishment, followed by an opportunity for community engagement and questions. At the end of the presentation, I'll give you instructions on how to raise your hand if you're dialed in by phone. An opportunity was provided to the public to submit questions in advance via an online form, and none were received at this time. So with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Stone's Throw.
Thank you, Quinn. Thank you all for attending. As you all know, we are Stone's Throw Cannabis, a social equity company proposing an adult use retail dispensary and courier operation at 727 Atlantic Avenue. This would be our sixth time meeting with the community. Our first abutters meeting was held on February 20th, followed by a second on March 8th. As you may also know, we were denied without prejudice by the ZBA in August. We are in the process of requesting a new hearing date. While not required by the city and ZBA, we want to continue the conversation with the community. We would also want the opportunity today to clarify some of the issues that we have discussed with the community, including considering amending our hours of operation on Sundays from an opening of 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. based on community feedback. The single delivery vehicle will be housed in a private garage where not in use, not taken up on-street parking. We're proposing security cameras with access to BPD that cover significant portions of the neighborhood, not currently covered or required by the CCC or the city. And we are also committed to being a net positive in the community and working with all of the abutters, elected officials, stakeholders, and community groups to ensure we do our part in keeping the safety and security in the community, as well as bettering the community and improving it. Our proposed location is on the corner of Beach Street and Atlantic, 727 Atlantic Avenue. I think you went all the way back to the last. You're on mute, Quinn. Yep. We can give him a few minutes to get the screen back up. And if we can go on to the
Yep, so it should be on the first slide now.
Yep.
Are you ready for the next
Yep,
one?
so this is our proposed location. We have approximately 3,000 square feet of retail space on the first floor and 3,000 square feet of space on the administrative floor on the second level. Plenty of transportation options for this location. And as part of our security, all standard operating procedures must be approved by the Boston Cannabis Board and the Cannabis Control Commission. All of our employees are required to pass extensive background checks. We will have controlled access to approved personnel entering the facility. Security personnel will check IDs upon entry at the counter, upon entry and purchase of product. We could go on to the next slide. Another key component of our state application requirement, I think we want to go to the diversion, prevention, and nuisance slide, Quinn. Okay.
Is it?
I'll read through it. Yep, no worries. Another key component of our state application requirement is to provide the anti-diversion plan. We will only sell to adults 21 and over. We'll be using the metric system to track all of our sales. We will also have an anti-diversion and friendly neighbor agreement training to employees to prevent straw purchases and nuisances. We will retain the right to deny sales to any individuals who violate our friendly neighbor agreement, and we will also be storing our cannabis products in accordance with state law. As part of our state application, we are also required to address our plan for nuisance abatement. As part of our plan, we will be allowing customers to pre-order on peak days to prevent overcrowding at this location. And our one vehicle delivery service will serve nearby neighborhoods only, reducing the amount of customers coming into the store. We will also be working with local and minority owned security company, previous Boston police employee, and we'll have a 24-hour video surveillance that's accessible by the Boston Police Department. Like I said before, we've presented 6 times already to the community, so we're gonna spare you 14 deck presentation and really just we're here to answer your questions and receive some of your feedback and concerns.
Thank you.
I'll hand it over to Leslie Hawkins, our lawyer with Prince LaBelle, who's here helping us today.
Thank you, Desi. That was helpful. Again, as Desi and the team is aware, this proposal has been vetted in the community, and we greatly appreciate all the time and effort that everyone has put into this. Knowing that this is a unique neighborhood, being both residential and commercial, we understand there are very unique challenges here. We appreciate this as an additional opportunity for continued dialogue in this community. One of the things that I think is worth pointing out is that the city of Boston has actually not only ceased, now that so many of these establishments are operating, not only has the city ceased taking the 3% community impact fee, they've actually made the determination to give back that money in instances where they found that there was no impact. They obviously reserve the right to continue taking that money if there is an impact. But this is a well-established group of operators, advocates, attorneys, and individuals in the space. This is a really unique group of individuals. To be honest, these establishments were mirrored off of liquor license establishments. And as you are aware, our closing hours and our impact is honestly far less than a bar or restaurant, and in line and actually less than most retail package stores in the city of Boston. This group has made a very clear good faith effort to address the concerns that exist, the concerns that we're simply not seeing play out anywhere in the city. And we actually believe that we can be community partners as a net positive, ranging from the additional security cameras to the additional security regulations. We think that we're actually bringing something to the community as opposed to being a negative. And as Desi noted, this is not a meeting that was required by the city or the Zoning Board of Appeals, but given the fact that we were denied without prejudice, which we are the first to have been denied without prejudice, and the board noted on the record that they wanted us to continue a conversation, but also felt that, you know, there was a good opportunity here. We wanted to come back and continue the communication. And this is a group that, whether you're pro-cannabis or anti-cannabis, we're here to continue that conversation and to be good neighborhood partners. So, you know, I'm not part of the team other than as the attorney, and I'm here to answer any sort of process questions or related questions. But, you know, we did want to clarify some of the concerns that came up at the Zoning Board of Appeals. One of those being where the delivery vehicle is being housed. It will not be housed on a city street. It will be housed in a private garage. And another being the community space. I think there was some misunderstanding about how often that space was going to be used. We are looking at approximately 6 events of approximately 8 people on that second floor per year. So that's something we're looking at for occasional expungement clinics, occasional bud tender trainings, but all very narrowly tailored, as we're certainly not the only operators who are offering the same. And with that, I will turn it back to Quinn, who's going to facilitate questions and answers.
Thank you, Leslie. And thank you everyone for attending. So we're now going to move into the community participation part of tonight's meeting. If you have any questions or comments about this proposal, you should either use the Zoom raise hand button on your screen to signal me, or if you're dialed in by telephone, you can dial in *9 to raise your hand, and then you should wait for me to, it'll give you a prompt to unmute yourself. So at this time, please raise your hand if you have any comments or questions. Catherine Friedman, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
First of all, I want to just say thank you for reaching out again to the community, for letting us know about this meeting so that we can have more of a discussion about this proposal. As you know, I've opposed it in the past. There are lots of reasons for that. I'm not sure that all my reasons have been clear enough, because I think that while you've attempted to address some of them with what you're saying, there's still a lot of issues about this proposal for the neighborhood, and also for all the politicians who came out in opposition too. So the first kind of big issue that we should talk about is the distrust that the neighborhood has for this group because of information that was relayed in the licensing board hearing or not relayed prior to it. So for instance, we were not alerted to that second floor community space until the licensing board hearing, despite all of the conversations that we've had and the presentations that have been done. So of course, you know, that was a big wake up call to the neighborhood. You know, what else is coming in this proposal? You know, I think honesty is important here. The traffic study, which had been asked for multiple times, that was not shared until the same day as the licensing board hearing. So we didn't have a chance to see the traffic study. The traffic study also has some issues. During the licensing board hearing, we listened to a presentation that said that the Leather District has hundreds of liquor stores. That is absolutely not true. And if you look back at any recording of the licensing board hearing, you will see that that was actually said. So you can imagine why there might be some distrust here to start with. But going back, one of the issues with the parking and the traffic study was not so much about the delivery vehicle. That was an issue, but it's about the marketing that we've been told from the start is really for commuters, for people in the suburbs whose towns don't have dispensaries. And so if you can imagine all the cars that will be coming off of the highway from other neighborhoods, not the ones that are, you know, within the delivery range, and it's not really marketing to people in this neighborhood. There's not really a need for people in this neighborhood. So you've got to think about, what about all those cars that are going to be pulling up and double parking while people go in to make purchases? So that is of extreme concern, considering all of the congestion on Atlantic Avenue and the fact that there's a pretty large residential building right next door, and those people are already struggling to access their own building, to the point where moving trucks are parking on sidewalks. So this is of concern. We do not have any garages currently open within the neighborhood for the public to park, including residents. So again, that has to be addressed. Some other issues. Can you just repeat the hours that you said?
I believe that the revised hours that we're open to discussing are 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and Desi will correct me if I'm wrong, with the exception of being open to, we know there are specific concerns about Sundays regarding a 10 a.m. opening. One thing, Ms. Friedman, I do want to note, and I know this was put on the record at the Zoning Board of Appeals hearing, is that this group is committed to not advertising on billboards to bring in individuals from outside the neighborhood. What we're seeing, and as you probably know, as a very active resident, is that there are a minimum of 52, not just cannabis establishments, but retail recreational establishments under the law. That's the minimum that have to be cited in the city of Boston. So we aren't seeing the lines, right? This isn't Netta. That time is long gone. What we're seeing is that just like when you go to your local wine store, your local coffee shop, people are going to the places that are close to them. So they're passed through traffic that would otherwise be occurring. And we think that is actually what the traffic study, and actually, if you look at any of these establishments who are operational to date, knowing that they're going to be an increasing number coming on the market, I think that's what we're seeing. We completely understand the concern, right? Nobody wants something negative coming into their community. But to be honest, we're seeing less volume in these establishments than you would at a Dunkin' Donuts, than another retail use, without the net positive, even without, if the 3% local impact fee, you're still, the 26% tax is still very clearly contributing to the community. And those are all conversations that we're here to have. If someone stated on the record that there were hundreds of package stores, I'm sure that was hyperbole. I don't think that was in someone inadvertently.
It was said in a licensing board presentation with a map showing all of Boston, but saying the Leather District has hundreds of liquor stores. And I encourage you to look at that.
Yep. Okay. And let me answer to that, Catherine. So since our March 8th meeting, our second private abutters meeting, where we already had the concerns that you emailed in February from the Leather District Neighborhood Association's concerns, we had addressed all of the concerns. And at our March 8th meeting, we presented our full proposal, which included, as part of our community benefits, using the second floor space for expungement clinics and maybe bud tender programs. On the BCB hearing date, we did mention liquor licenses, not liquor stores, as it relates to us being licensed. The cannabis licensing is being looked at in very much comparison with the liquor licenses in neighborhoods. So for every 4 liquor stores or liquor licenses, the city was presuming to have at least one cannabis store. So what we were speaking about specifically at the Boston Cannabis Board hearing was not liquor stores, because we've been aware since day one that we applied in this neighborhood that there is only one liquor store and that they don't sell nips. We've been doing our homework and really listening to the concerns that you guys have had. And so, just to clarify, we were talking about liquor licenses, not liquor stores.
We still don't have hundreds of liquor licenses anywhere near here.
Yeah, I don't believe I used the word hundreds. I believe I did the presentation, and I'm pretty sure I didn't use the word hundreds. But and then I really want to clarify that we've been as honest as we could be throughout this process. We've been as open as we could be. We've addressed the concerns. We've gone above and beyond to meet with the neighborhood. I don't believe you were at the March 8th meeting or any of the Leather District Neighborhood Association members. We did send you the presentation and addressed the concerns via email, and we also did not receive a response. So, way past March 8th, our lines were open to continue the discussion before the hearing, and that was our hope. I'm sorry that that didn't happen. And we're
We
here
did,
today.
so I do have some neighbors on here and I do want them to be able to
Mhm.
chime in too. But I do
Absolutely.
think that we all, a group of us had a discussion after the licensing board hearing, and we were all surprised to finally be seeing the traffic study. We were all surprised by what we all heard was hundreds of liquor stores, and it was the first time anybody had heard of the community space.
No,
And I've attended
Catherine,
every meeting.
you have not attended every meeting. You were not at the March 8th meeting, and I can gladly forward you all of the presentations where we mentioned as a community benefit, we wanted to offer expungement clinics for Boston residents
Can you
who have been harmed
define,
by the war on drugs.
what's involved with the expungement clinics? Because I don't think anybody's been made clear of that.
What do you mean? What's involved? So with
What's
the
involved with an
expungement clinic,
yes, what
yeah,
happens during an
we're gonna be,
expungement clinic?
yeah, we're gonna be working with a organization that specializes in expungement clinics. Leslie, I think you can chime in on who those organizations are, because
So
Blake's not here today, but
So Desi,
Um,
let me jump in there. Obviously, as everyone here knows, part of legalization and the real motivation behind it was to help those negatively impacted by the war on drugs. And that includes disproportionately impacted communities, disproportionately impacted individuals. And one of the things that the CCC, as the governing body at the state level, really encourages applicants, licensees, municipalities to do is invest in expunging the records of those who have a non-violent cannabis-related conviction, excluding sale to a minors or sale near a store. These clinics are happening all over the state. They are one of the best parts of this, right? Because that clears the quarry of someone who otherwise couldn't get a job. And that's one of the things that this team wants to offer. So when we say community space, we mean, as I said, 6, maybe 8 between these and bud tender events each year attended by 10 to 12 people. But we also want to offer that space if the Leather District Neighborhood Association or if another community group needs to use it, and we can review that on a case-by-case basis. But this space is used for back of house. This is just an additional amenity that this team offered to the community. So anyone who can look at an expungement clinic as a negative is really not understanding where legalization came from here, and that this is actually something that we're dealing with statewide, because it's so important to make sure, again, that those disproportionately impacted by the failed war on drugs are actually reaping a benefit here. So, I applaud the team for proposing it. We're absolutely happy to discuss logistics, where those individuals would park, but is it such a low volume that I think maybe it just wasn't properly articulated?
It was not explained in any way. It was not mentioned before.
But now, and
that
that's why
meeting. So I do thank you for clarifying that. And I think that that's a use that maybe is more appropriate. But again, when we find out about an additional space that was not originally presented, you have to understand that we kind of question, well, why didn't we, why weren't we told about it from the start? Because that's something that people could potentially get behind. But finally, because I do want to give others a chance to talk, I think one of the reasons why a lot of people are opposed to this, because again, it's right there with residential buildings on either side of it. But also, this would be kind of the new welcome mat to the city for all people coming from all points south and west. And that's something that really is not kind of necessarily the look that Boston wants. The first thing that you arrive, you get off at the bus station and there's basically signage advertising cannabis, but no activated street front, because again, it doesn't activate a street. The other thing, and it is of serious concern to the neighborhood, is that we are having an issue with all the construction that's around, and a lot of workers using our alleys to smoke while on the job. And that is something that obviously don't have you don't have any control over what's happening right now. However, you can understand why this would be a fear of making it more accessible in the immediate vicinity of a huge project like South Station when there's heavy equipment being operated. So that's not something that obviously you can speak to at the moment, but it's something that you need to be aware of if you're proceeding with this proposal.
Well, and I'll
Thank you.
defer
Thank
to
you.
Desi on operationally, how that works and how this is actually going to increase security, but I can tell you, there has never been an arrest, even with all of the heightened scrutiny in the city of Boston, for someone using cannabis publicly that was legally bought from a retail recreational establishment that has led to public consumption. And I will obviously defer to Desi and her team on what their good neighbor agreement, which we've actually seen across the city, has been incredibly successful, looks like.
Yep. I want to address that there will be no advertising on our storefront, Catherine. That's actually illegal and we're not supposed to. But thank you for your questions and your feedback.
Okay, so any more questions, Catherine? Or I have a few from the chat that I can read. I don't see any hands raised, so please do use the hand raise feature, or if you're on a phone, you can dial *9. All right, so I'm going to move to a couple of questions from Stan McGee. First, where could one go to see all of the changes between the first proposal and the current proposal?
I actually think that's a great question. Stan, I'm going to drop my email in the chat, and I know Desi will too, but we're happy to provide you in writing kind of an overview of where we started, where we went, and where we are. Because I do think this team has really taken into consideration, especially being Boston residents, understanding the complex challenges that are faced in the city that aren't really dealt with other spots. That's a very good question. I think we've got a really good story to tell.
Stan, yeah, we can send over the presentations.
Okay, and there's one more question from Stan. So if you do have follow-up, Stan, feel free to put it in the chat box as well. But I'll move on to your next question. I haven't seen the Stones Throw traffic study. Does it account for all of the traffic to and from the garage for the South Station Tower project? The entrance to and exit from that garage will be, starting in 2024 to 25, directly across the street from 727 Atlantic Avenue. And when I say directly, I mean directly across the street. Hines and the BPDA have those anticipated vehicle numbers. This is something I'm hearing from many at 717 Atlantic. Do you have a response to that one?
Yeah, our traffic study doesn't include that, but we're happy to share the traffic study with you as well, Stan. Thank you.
Okay, and then there's a question from Micah Fuller. To second Stan, is there a website, private or otherwise, that contains the information presented? I don't think the burden should be on the abutters. I want to be engaged, but it's not easily accessed outside of the meetings.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Desi, I'll defer to you.
Yeah, we're happy to share the presentation. If you want to put your email on the chat, we've responded to every email that has come in. We have really maintained an open line of communication with all of the neighbors, and have answered as many questions as we could, and we'll continue to do that.
All right, feel free to put any follow-up in the chat or raise your hand, Micah. Follow-up question from Stan McGee. I know what it means, but can you please explain to the non-lawyers here what denial without prejudice means? Thank you.
Desi, do you mind if I take this one?
Absolutely.
So when you go to the Zoning Board of Appeals or any city body, they have the opportunity to deny or deny without prejudice. A denial at the Zoning Board of Appeals means you have to wait at least 1 year to refile unless you have substantive changes to your application. Denial without prejudice means that they feel that you can refile immediately and come back for another hearing And I can say that I believe this is the first of any cannabis establishment in the city who has been denied without prejudice, which I think, it made it clear to us that we needed to continue to provide information, to continue this discussion, and that we have the opportunity to immediately file and come back. I do think it's worth noting that that denial occurred in August, and the project team has, instead of just immediately asking for a new hearing, regrouped, talked about what potential changes could be made, but also what clarifications and additional information could be made. And I think, as Catherine, Ms. Friedman noted, there was a lack of understanding about the real positives we were bringing to the second floor. And so I think this is a great example of we're coming back to the community as a team to continue the conversation in good faith, because we're not looking to just get right back and forth in front of the ZBA and propose the exact same thing. We want to make sure that we're an active member of this community, both during this process and hopefully after it.
Thanks, Leslie. I don't see any hands raised for questions right now. So please do, I'll give the people a minute to raise their hand. All right, we have somebody with a phone, so I'm going to ask you to unmute. Uh, 617423, you should get a prompt to unmute. There we go.
Thank you so much. First of all, my name is Christy Freed. I was on the Zoom call and I couldn't get my microphone to work, so I switched to the telephone. So I thank you for giving me several different options on how to join this call tonight. So I have tried to keep up with what's going on at Stone's Throw as best I can. I will admit that I probably have missed a meeting or two along the way, and I am happy that you're taking our feedback and that you're making changes. I'll be honest with you, the changes seem a little slight. I mean, moving operating hours from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning doesn't seem like it's enough, in my personal opinion. Now, I happen to run a business in the residential building. It's a work-live space next to Stone's Throw, the proposed site at 717 Atlantic Avenue. And I can certainly see that this has been going on for quite a long time. I can certainly see how we may be some squeaky wheels that are kind of sticking in your craw. And, personally, I don't necessarily want to be that person. It's not really any sort of consequence, but, you make some sweeping accusations about the public and about how, people who don't use cannabis are never going to agree to any of this. And I have to say, I don't personally, that's not true for me. I do take the commuter rail. I do drive here. I do find parking. It's in garages. State Street is probably the most popular because it's the least expensive for me. I do take that train in and out of work. And, not for nothing, but I do also partake in recreational cannabis consumption, and I work, I get my edibles from a place down in, Rockland, Massachusetts. So it's not like I'm looking for a place in the city. So it's not like I'm opposed to it on a kind of a, what do you call it? I'm not opposed to the idea of recreational cannabis. I get it. Just went to a party on Beach Street on Saturday night, and people were smoking marijuana on the street, and I get it. It happens. I am also, however, honored to represent the Leather District Neighborhood Association in one small part of my life, and that is going to the neighborhood Boston Police Department meeting, representing this neighborhood, gathering information and bringing it back. And although the November meeting wasn't held, the October meeting was very eye-opening to some of the crime that is escalating from the downtown cannabis stores. And that's of concern to me. Obviously, the concern from my neighbors about the quality of life issues, especially those raising children and having families here in the neighborhood, I stand in solidarity with them. And one last thing I'd like to say, and these are all more comments than questions. I don't particularly have a question at this time. But I do want to thank you for bringing, there's a female attorney on this phone call representing Stone's Throw, and I would like to thank you for coming tonight. There has been another attorney representing Stone's Throw, especially at that August ZBA meeting, who is very hostile, very confrontational, and I'll be honest with you, he has made more enemies in the Leather District than he has to build bridges. So thank you for bringing in another counsel to represent your point of view.
Well, we appreciate that. So we've got a Christy Freed and then a Catherine Friedman. So this is Leslie. I am counsel, and my co-counsel Blake Mensing. I can tell you, if he was ever confrontational, it's because he's passionate and not because he's looking to be confrontational. But that's great feedback. I do want to say, representing many of the downtown establishments, we have not heard that feedback from the police department. We have actually never seen, and the Boston Cannabis Board has not to date actually seen anything that demonstrates that there is a tie between these establishments and an increase in crime. And I can say that both living in the city and having previously served with the city. That being said, one of the things that we are in the process of doing is reaching out to Captain Chicolo, because many of the concerns in your neighborhood, which you know far better than we do, right, living there, I live in Dorchester, is that they're tied to neighboring communities, especially around some of the late night bars and clubs, which we don't have ours, anything similar to that. And I know that one of the big pushes there has been for additional security footage. And one of the commitments of this team that I'll ask Desi to detail about how exactly these cameras work, but is increased outside in addition to what is necessary under the CCC requirements, are these additional cameras that we will be giving access to anyone who wants it, right? So even if there's an issue that it's nothing to do related to our facility, that access is there, and they can actually view that security footage. And Desi, this was Desi's brainchild, so I'm going to let her jump in.
Thank you, Leslie. And Christy, just before I get into that, if you could send us any information that you have when it in relation to, you know, any violence or crimes associated with these other dispensaries, I think it's information that we would want and
Oh yeah,
and
no
need
problem.
to know. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so when we first proposed at the Leather District Neighborhood Association and held private abutters meeting, we really, you know, what really stood out to me was the safety concerns in the neighborhood and some of the crimes that were happening well into my community outreach in this neighborhood. I also attended community meetings in Chinatown over at the Quincy School, where President Council Ed Flynn addressed a lot of the concerns that the community had. But, you know, what I really learned is that, you know, these crimes were happening and you know, it was people, you know, were in fear, especially in the Chinatown community. And so, you know, my idea was, as much as possible, is if we can add more coverage, more cameras to our location, which is a great location to do so because we're right on the corner. So we're able to get Beach Street, we're able to get across the street at South Station, and we're able to look down Atlantic Avenue to make sure nobody's double parking at 717 or smoking cannabis in front of the building 717. I think at a previous meeting, I was told that you guys don't currently have cameras at your front door, and I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, or if I'm remembering it correctly, but you know, I felt like it was, yeah, I felt like it was really important to offer, you know, added security, even though it wasn't required. If it were my neighborhood, I would want it. I live in Roxbury. I grew up in the South End right next to the downtown area. And so, you know, I really care about the Boston communities. And when I hear things that are happening in the for, you know, older Chinatown people being attacked, that really just it rubbed me the wrong way. And I, you know, pulled the team together, and we were able to all agree to have these added security cameras that will be accessible to neighborhood groups or stakeholders. So even if we're not open, these cameras are running, we should be able to capture any of the activity going on in that corner.
Good. No, listen, that's not bad. That's good for all of us, I think. I know there's definitely some concern with some of our neighbors about privacy and how that's going to be used and things, but I don't particularly think that that's a swelling majority, but I do know it is of some concern. And as you go through this appellate process, I wouldn't be surprised if people brought that to your attention. And I am very supportive and very happy to hear that you're reaching out to the BPD. Not sure why you haven't yet, but they'll be able to give you the reports. There's some muggings that are now, there's a little gang of individuals that they've, I believe, if they haven't caught them, they've at least identified them, and they're watching people go in, getting their cannabis, and then coming out, and then they're mugging them and taking their wallets and their edibles and their, I think, loose leaf, but I could be wrong on the loose leaf. It could have just been edibles. But
we're also seeing the same, and it's the same group. I'm also a liquor licensing attorney. We're seeing the same, watching people come out of bars and restaurants downtown and going to their ATMs, and they're watching them, and they're going after them. So that's something that you're absolutely on point, that BPD has been on, but they've been on it for quite some time. And it's definitely not just limited to cannabis establishments. It's limited to anywhere where people are coming out, and even more so with the bars and restaurants later at night is where they're really seeing them. They actually, as you probably know, put out an alert not that long ago about it, really focused on the bars and restaurants in this area too. So yeah, you're not wrong that that's an issue, and we actually think that that's something that our security really helps with, because you're going to have, even though it's not nearly as late as the bars and restaurants are open to, but we will have that security footage that we might not have otherwise of folks in and out of the neighborhood.
thank God, you do not want to be out on these streets after 9 p.m., but that's another story for another day. Okay, so I do have two quick questions while we've been talking. I noticed today that I read an article today that there's a federal crackdown on ATMs, and that your clients aren't going to be able to pay using their debit cards any longer, that it's going to be a cash sale. Is that something that you guys are addressing?
I think that's something that everyone's addressing in the industry, but there's any number of payment processing organizations, because this is not currently a bankable industry. So those, Desi, feel free, please, to jump in here, you know, even more than me, but that's something that all operators have been dealing with for a significant amount of time.
Yeah, and then things are just constantly changing in the cannabis industry. So that's, I mean, we have heard about that. But for now, that doesn't seem to be the case here in Massachusetts. But as Leslie mentioned, there are multiple vendors for cashier for dispensaries. So
it's not going to be an all cash business?
it is a cash business. Right now, we're seeing debit cards being taken, that we're taking debit cards. The article that you're speaking about is not something that's actually happening now. So there are the 15 dispensaries that are open right now have been taking debit card payments.
Okay, local, it's Massachusetts banking?
Yes, there are a number of banks in Massachusetts that actually are in the cannabis space. Obviously, it's not really legal, so it's a little tough, but there are one, they can take debit cards still, but also there are a number of credit card processing. To think that this industry would have gotten to this point, but there are companies that actually this is what they do in the cannabis space, is they do card processing agreements. So it's not a purely cash industry, although the CCC's regulations and the vault regulations and the randomized pickup and delivery regulations really protect against it, even if it were, which is why, you know, if you said to Desi and the team at Stone's Throw, well, when is your cash pickup and drop off going to come? We're not going to tell you, because it has to be
Right.
randomized, and there have to be video cameras, and it is more highly regulated than I think people realize.
And we're still a little close to Charlestown. Yeah, we don't need any bank robbers. We're good.
I grew up in Charlestown, so I grew up in Bunker Hill
We got enough
Project.
problems. And then the last question, and I do apologize for taking up so much time. I'll let my other neighbors speak. Last time, and I do apologize. I understand his name is Blake. Last time Blake was making a presentation, he was talking about the number of people that you had available inside to stand in queue. And I appreciate that the newness of the cannabis industry has come and gone, and it's not like you said, it's not nearly the stanchions that we're talking about before. But could you kind of either refresh my memory or tell me whether you toned that number down? How many people can you have inside in line?
We can queue up to 30 people in the queuing area, and we can have up to 10 registers. What we're seeing, right, and I'll go into Stan's question, how many cannabis establishments have been approved by Boston? I believe the number, the 52, the minimum 52 have been approved. Right now, there are 15, about 15 dispensaries already open. And yeah, so what we're seeing is as these stores begin to open, we're seeing, you know, the less people going to these stores. So it's not, you don't have, you know, people driving in from Lowell or Lynn or, you know, other parts of the state to come into one store in Boston. It's more of like a local, it's more of a local product being sold. I believe Stan asked how many applications are pending. I mean, I would assume the remainder of the 52 out of the 15 that are open. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to there's a few in the chat to go through.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
I'll let you handle it. And
Any
then
more questions from
just to-
Christy? Or go ahead.
just to finish his last question, if I believe the proposal on South Street, they do have a store in Western Mass from what I know of the company, but we're not related to that company. We've never met with them. And I'm not sure if they still have a proposal on South Street anymore, so.
All right, and there's no hands raised right now, so if you're on the phone, feel free to hit *9 to raise your hand. If you're on Zoom, just click that raise hand button. There's 3 more questions from the chat pending that we'll go through, so you have a little bit of time to raise your hand. First, from Lee, Hollywood loves the Leather District to shoot movies. As a result, many streets were designated from them. This has a very negative impact to the local businesses. Have you included this factor in your traffic study in addition to the already heavily congested Atlantic Ave?
We haven't included that, Lee. We actually think that most of our customers will just be walk-in. People hate driving into downtown for anything. There are already, I believe, 3 dispensaries open and about 5 approvals in the downtown area, and so we're not expecting traffic or to, you know, if the streets are closed down because they're shooting a movie, we're not expecting that to impact our business because we feel people are going to be walking in or bike, or they'll be ordering through our delivery system. So,
And Desi, if we are open and there's something, you'll get the notification from BTD, and that's something that we can send to our existing customers to say, hey, as a reminder, you know, we know you usually take public transit or you're usually walking by, but we just want to, you know, we could put that out on our social media. We can help publicize that.
I agree, that's a great idea, along with any street closings having to do with the South Station construction across the street, as Stan mentioned earlier. We'll take a note of that and bring it back to the team, for sure.
Okay, if
Thank
there's
you.
any follow-up on there, feel free to type in another message into the chat. Thanks. Stan, another comment from Stan. You should also be able to get new traffic numbers for 745 Atlantic from Oxford Properties. That garage is not in use now during the life sciences / lab use conversion, but it will be back online once the construction work is done.
Thank you,
There was a
Stan.
question, yeah. Catherine Friedman, the dispensaries in downtown Crossing do not open before 10 a.m. and close by 7 p.m. (parentheses 6 p.m. on Sundays). So do you have a response to that one, or should I move on?
Oh, Desi, you're muted.
Can you repeat was it a question or a statement?
Comment, the dispensaries in downtown Crossing do not open before 10 a.m. and close by 7 p.m., 6 p.m. on Sundays.
Okay,
I think we covered most of this from Stan. We talked about the first half, at least, how many have been approved by Boston and how many applications are pending. And then also, do you know anything about the proposed cannabis retailer on South Street that already has a store in Western Mass? You might have answered that, actually.
I think Desi
Yes, I
answered
did.
that. In terms of how many have been approved by Boston, again, you have to remember that it's not 52 cannabis establishments, it's 52 retail recreational establishments. So
Mhm.
that excludes deliveries, manufacturing only, medical. But it's understandable that, you know, people are looking to the fact that they are kind of nearing that 52, even with retail rec, they're not there yet, is my understanding.
Okay,
But
thank
also
you for that
not all of
clarification.
these, not all of these places are going to open. It's just like bars, restaurants, coffee shops, Dunkin' Donuts. You know, it's a competitive market, just like anything else. And that's one of the reasons that you're not seeing the impacts of Netta in Brookline, where you have one, right? That this is actually going to be, it's a legal business, and you're actually going to see saturation, and the ones who are very successful are going to be very successful, and there are going to be places that don't ever open. You know, it's to some extent self-regulating, why the fact that these, you know, there are proponents who are putting so much time, effort, money, and you know, their energy into this industry. It really is, it's impressive.
Yeah, and I mean, I think when you add the hundreds of stores that are open across the state, then it, you know, I mean, Boston, we've been pretty late in entering the cannabis industry due to the regulations. And we do appreciate the city for taking its time and making sure that these regulations have rolled out appropriately so as to not harm our city or in our communities.
All right, so I'm not seeing any pending questions in the chat, and I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I'll just repeat one more time. If you're dialed in on a phone, please use the *9 key to raise your hand, and I'll ask you to unmute. Otherwise, use the raise hand button. I'll give you a few seconds. You can also type in any last messages into the chat. Any last comments from the Stones Throw team before we close?
Sorry, no, I thank everyone for coming today. I believe many of the residents have access to our emails and can communicate with us. We're happy to answer any questions or comments that may come up after today's meeting. And we really, you know, like I said, we really thank you for coming out. This is our 6th meeting, so we're not expecting it to be the last either. So we appreciate your time and have a great evening.
All right, thank you very much and have a great night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.